Hello, everyone, and welcome to our week 2 go-to training. My name is Stephanie Fetrin, and I'm one of the psychology of play instructors. So I see that we have some students here from different sections. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming. And hello to everyone who's listening to the recording. What we're going to be talking about today for the first hour is positive psychology. And then for the second hour, we're going to be focusing on the brain and neuroplasticity. So I'm going to cover a lot of the things that are in the readings and reviewing some of that information, giving you some additional examples. So feel free to raise your hand or let me know in the chat box if you have any questions along the way. All right, so let's go ahead and jump in. What our agenda is for talking about positive psychology. Basically, the goal of positive psychology is to change the focus of psychology from focusing on repairing what's broken or the worst things in life to also focusing on building up our positive qualities. So it's basically the study of how humans prosper in the face of adversity. It's shifting the focus from focusing on what's wrong with someone and start really looking at what's going right. So we truly believe that incorporating these concepts of play is going to help you have better creativity, productivity, and positivity. So let's talk about first the historical perspectives of positive psychology and how it came about. And then we're going to talk about gratitude, doing a little activity, talk about happiness, what that means, and then we're going to go over the concept of flow. And these are just a few of the main concepts of positive psychology. There's a lot of books and information about it. If you're interested, I'll give you some resources at the end. So let's go back in time for the history of psychology, and we need to go to post-World War II. So basically, after the war, the field of psychology exploded because veterans were coming home. They went off to war successful and confident, and they came back emotionally changed. A lot of them lost their jobs or status or because of their suffering with mental illness or emotionally. And at that time, the clinical side of psychology was booming. So it was science-based, it was funded by the space programs at the time, actually. And the focus on psychology was about pathology. Okay, we see that these people are coming back from the war. We see that they're broken, that they need to be fixed, right? How do we do that? So it became focused on what's called a disease model. So in 1947, the National Institute of Mental Health was founded, and academics found they could get grants in their research if it was about pathology. So lots of studies started popping up of how we're going to fix this disease of mental illness. What are we going to do about it? Also during this time, the VA was founded, and psychologists realized, okay, this is a booming new industry. We need to get in on this. So those economic changes, also with the status of the veterans coming back, really shaped psychology and what that looked like at the time. So the positives of this were, all these studies that were done and all this funding really did make some huge strides in the understanding and treatment of mental illness. We have names for things like post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, anxiety, right? And how do we treat these? Coming up with different medications and treatment approaches. That was a big focus. And yes, now we've come a long way in that regard. But the cons or the negatives of this was that it's when you're focusing on a disease framework, you're talking about fixing things that are damaged, right? And the individual, focusing on, let's cure this individual suffering. And the problem with that is it does leave out the positive stuff, right? So Martin Seligman, who is one of the founders of positive psychology, he saw, and this is around in the 1990s, he, studied the traditional psychological theories like classical conditioning, learned helplessness, depression. And he was like, I'm seeing a lot of focus on what's going wrong with people, but I don't see a lot about what is making people that are happy, like studying what's making them happy and how are they being successful and why aren't we looking at that? So one significant moment in his life was in his speech in 1998 at the American Psychological Association, and he declared that psychologists need to study what makes people happy. And he said, the most important thing, this is a quote, he said, the most general thing I learned was that psychology was half-baked, literally half-baked. We had baked the part about mental illness. The other side's unbaked, the side of strength, the side of what we're good at. So basically he's saying, we need to start looking at this other half of people, right? So we have some ideas about, and we're going to talk about Mile Csikszentmihalyi. I can never pronounce his name. Dr. C, we'll call him Dr. C. He's another founder of positive psychology as well during his time. We're going to talk about him in a minute, but basically positive psychology is not just studying about pathology. It's looking at people's strengths and what makes them resilient, right? And it's not just fixing what it's broken, but also helping nurture the things that people are doing right. And psychology is not just a branch of medicine concerned with illness. It is also about other areas like play, growth, love, insight, work, education. All of these things matter to our mental well-being. And positive psychology is not about wishful thinking or fads. A lot of people at the time criticized positive psychology, saying, oh, this is just self-help books, and, that's not really helping people. It's not based on science. Well, yes, it is based on science. It's using the scientific method to study human behavior, but we're just studying something a little bit different. So this was, in the 90s. So obviously positive psychology has come a long way since then, and it's gained a lot of momentum in the last decade. So let's think, now that we know what positive psychology is all about, I'm going to ask you a question to kind of jump into some of these concepts. So I'm going to put out a poll. One second. What do you guys think? Do you have to be successful before you can be happy? Just what's your first thought? Yes or no? Or I'm not sure. In the poll on your screen. Don't overthink it, because I know this could be, you could definitely get really into this. But just your first initial thought. Do you have to be successful before you can be happy? All right, 91% of you voted. If you haven't voted, go ahead and vote now. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. We're at 98%. One person in here hasn't voted. Come on. It's probably someone that's on their phone and can't vote. So, yep, there's one person on their phone. Orion, I think. Okay, I'm going to close the poll. 86% of you believe, no, you do not have to be successful before you can be happy. I bet that 86% of you definitely did the reading, because that's exactly what we talk about in the readings about positive psychology, is that actually we tend to get this backwards. We think, okay, once I get successful, once I accomplish this, once I graduate college, once I get this job, once I get this career, once I do this, once I do that, I'll be happy. Once I reach that level. But what the research, the positive psychologists are studying is, no, being happy can actually bring more success into our lives. So, okay, personal experience, yes. So some of you have had personal experience with this, right? But conventionally, there is a belief, if we work hard, we're going to be more successful. If we're more successful, then we're going to be happy. But this is really saying something different. So, have you guys watched the video? in the materials this week? Not yet. Okay. I have a quick snippet of it in the material section, but for the sake of time, I'll just let you guys watch that. But it's basically just talking about, no, you don't have to be successful before you have to be happy. Happiness fuels success. So it's not the other way around. And how they prove this is they say your brain performs at positive significantly better than at negative, neutral, or stressed. So the more unhappy you are, the less productive you are going to be, right? The more optimistic you are in the present, the more engaged, creative, motivated, and resilient you are going to be in the workplace. Therefore, you're going to find yourselves being more successful when opportunities are presented to you because you're already in that positive mindset. So, for example, when you go to work and you're in a good mood and you're happy when you get to work, you end up being more productive. You more come up with more creative ideas than you wouldn't originally. But if you come into work in a bad mood, and thinking negative thoughts, how productive are you going to be in that situation? Let me see in the chat box. Brantley says, in my honesty, I've always known that you don't have to be successful to be happy. I have family and friends. I get to live my life, and because of that, I can be positive because I know I get to spend my time with people and enjoy being around and not enslave myself to the idea of working for happiness. Okay, so finding happiness in other things than success, family, friends. It really boils down to what are your core values? What is important to you? And Casey says also very goal achieved means that you set a higher standard to achieve said happiness. And we're not saying that success doesn't matter or wanting to have goals and achieve things. That's not true. Obviously, we all are here, you're all in college for a reason, right? You have goals, you have dreams, you have aspirations. But your mindset while you're achieving those goals can still be in a positive place, and that's actually going to benefit you. So hopefully that answers your question. Nick said, what if success is your happiness? And we're actually going to talk about that a little bit later when we talk about the PERMA model. So keep that in mind. So Tiffany says, Nick, will you ever achieve happiness? Well, sometimes what happens, and I think this is probably what you're getting at, Tiffany, is we have a goal, right? We reached a goal. Okay, and then we think, okay, now I'm going to be happy. But don't we always tend to find something else, like another goal to reach? So we're constantly chasing goals and dreams and thinking that's going to bring us happiness, but really happiness can be with us all the time. I guess that's the point, right? Tiffany says. Okay. So let's talk about the science of happiness. So when our brains are constantly scanning and focusing on the positive at any point during our day, we're gonna profit. Okay. And the more opportunities for positivity that we see, the more grateful we're going to be. So one of the cornerstones of positive psychology is about expressing gratitude. Let me just go ahead and read what Casey wrote. Success is always going to relate to happiness for us humans, but if you define happiness as the current, then each time you obtain success, it means that more to you. Yes, that's a great point too. All right, so I'm going to have you guys watch a video. So go up to your material section on your control panel. Hopefully you guys are familiar with this process by now. And I want you to watch the Session 2 Science of Happiness clip. Okay, and when you guys are finished, please type done in the chat box so that I know you're back. All right, it looks like most of you guys are finishing up. Sorry for those of you who had a hard time with the video loading. Sometimes Chop does that. Sorry. But as someone said in the chat box, this is you can find the video not cut down on YouTube if you search an experiment in gratitude, the science of happiness. So if you didn't get to watch, just a quick little synopsis is they did an experiment where they brought people in and they had them write a letter to express gratitude to someone that has been the most influential person in their life. And then they had them call that person. And they tested their levels of happiness before and after doing this experiment. And they showed that the people that not only expressed gratitude, yes, they increased, but the people that, or wrote down, I'm sorry, but the people that actually expressed it to that person had a more significant increase in their happiness. So, yes, very moving. So what I want you guys to do now, of course, is I'm going to have you take out a piece of paper or on your phone in your notes or in a text message or in a Facebook message or an email. I want you to write a message or write about the person who has most influenced you. Okay. So this is just the first part. We're just going to be writing down. So if that person is no longer with us, it can be a letter to them with your thoughts about them. It could be a famous person. It doesn't have to be someone you know necessarily. Microsoft Word's fine, Brantley. I just want you to be able to write your thoughts down. So wherever you want to do that, what works best for you is good. So I'm going to give you guys, let's say, hold on. Let me give you guys 2 minutes to just kind of write your thoughts down, okay? Why can't I get my timer to work? Hold on. Okay. Apparently it only wants me to do 5 minutes. Okay. Go ahead, 2 minutes now, and then I'll tell you when we're done. All right, so that was a little bit over 2 minutes, so hopefully you got some of your thoughts down. This is always something that you could continue later if you wanted to write more. But this is, an act of journaling, right? You're writing down or expressing your gratitude. This is very important for increasing your positivity and happiness. So another exercise you could do is writing 3 gratitudes down every night before you go to bed in a little notebook by your bed or on your phone. And if you do that every day for a month, you'll be surprised to see how much it helps with your mood. It really does. And that's a study that has been done over and over again. But now what I want you to do is I'm going to give you another couple minutes, and I want, if that person's still living, you can call them, you can send them a text message, write them a Facebook message or post, leave them a voicemail if they don't answer, send an email, or if they're in your house right now, go up to them and tell them or read them your letter. So I'm going to give you guys 3 minutes to go ahead and do that now. All right, that was almost about 3 minutes. Hopefully you got a chance to send off that text message. I know a couple of you said that the person that you call, you know they'll be sleeping or something, so totally got that. Did anyone get a hold of their person and get a response to their message or talk to them on the phone that wants to raise their hand and tell us what happened on the microphone? Sometimes it's nice to hear how that was. How was that? Okay, Stephanie Washington, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. All right, who did you contact?
My husband.
You're going to have to turn up your volume a little bit. I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're pretty quiet. Maybe try to go a little bit closer to your mic.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's a little bit better. All right, so who did you contact?
I texted my husband.
Okay. And what did he respond? Or how was that?
Well, I texted him and said, "Life with you has been way more surprising and adventurous than I could have ever imagined. You've always inspired me to be a better version of myself even when I didn't see what you could see. And well, I've been through a lot, military days, and I've been sick for a long time. And
Hmm.
my mom stopped talking to me, my dad stopped talking to me. So it was a long process.
Hmm.
And he responded with a bunch of hearts and said, I love you more than you can ever imagine.
Oh, that's so special. Thank you for sharing that with us. Sometimes we feel these things, but we don't take the time to write it down and actually express it. And not only does it
Absolutely.
feel good for him, I'm sure, but it also feels good for you to, feel connected
It
to
does.
him and all the things that he's done to be there for you. Thanks for sharing, Stephanie. Let's see, Jamar, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. You got to unmute yourself on your end too. Jamar Hill. There you go.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I shared on my mother's Facebook page. I know she's at lunch right now with some friends, but I shared today. Today in class, they asked us who is the most influential person in our lives. My answer: God and my mother. I'm very thankful, grateful, and humbled to have a human being care for me from birth to still caring for me as an adult. A single mother, a mother who taught her son the things a man should. A father. I can never truly pay you back, but my plan is to show you that I understand. Dear Mama, thank you.
Is that her responding back?
It's not, but that
Oh,
was
okay.
another. Sorry about that, but it's not. I'll definitely love to share in the discussion what her response is.
Yeah. Oh, that's so nice. Thank you for sharing. And it's like, sometimes we don't even think to thank these people unless it's like their birthday or like if it's a partner on Valentine's Day or if it's our mom on Mother's Day. But imagine how special she's going to feel to just get this message randomly from you on Facebook.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
thank you.
And how do you feel after doing it? Oh, sorry, you muted yourself.
You know what? I feel pretty good. I wanted to leave a comment on the actual video chop or the chop YouTube link, but I couldn't sign in correctly. So I feel really good. I felt motivated to do it a little bit more after seeing that video. And
Uh-huh.
you do have a sense of anxiety when doing it because it's like I'm being vulnerable. But I think that it is very helpful as well as writing the three things of gratitude. Maybe not every night, but something every so often. So I think it's a great exercise.
Yeah, thanks for sharing.
Thank
Um,
you.
Yeah, great point. Sometimes when we're just feeling down, it's like one of those things that we can be like, okay, this is something I can actively do that will help boost my mood, right? But yeah, it's something that's simple that we can do pretty easily. It doesn't take a lot to make a phone call or write a message to someone that has, influenced us in a positive way. And like you said, sometimes that can be a little vulnerable. It's not always easy to share our feelings. Not everyone has the skill to do that freely and comfortably. So it does kind of push you a little bit um, in that emotional way, which is always a good thing, even if it seems hard. All right, let's hear from one more person. Let's hear from Brantley. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. Go ahead. Who did you contact?
I contacted I put it on Facebook. I haven't got a reply back yet, but I did my grandfather this time because in high school we had to do one, and I did it for my mom. But I had to say my grandfather this time because as I was growing up, he would basically influence me to stick up for myself and make sure that my word meant what my word is, rather than having to try and jump around and get around problems. He told me to face my problems head on, and that's what made me who I am today. And I remember when I was a kid, he would let me go to his job with the fire department, and he'd always let me. He'd show that he wanted me to be interested in what he was doing all the time. Showed me how to work with wood, and it was really fun just growing up with him.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm sure he's going to be surprised maybe to hear all that from you, like how influential he's been since it sounds like you were really little. So that's very special. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for raising your hand and sharing with the class. I'm sure that a lot of you can relate to, um, you know, how good it feels to just kind of hear these stories, because it, it just makes me put a smile on my face, and I don't know any of you well. So imagine how that other person's going to feel when they hear that message. So, yes, you did it, Brantley. Good job. So they actually found, when they did this study and they picked random volunteers and they trained them to become more grateful over a period of few weeks, that they actually became happier, more optimistic, they felt more socially connected, they enjoyed better quality of sleep, and they even experienced fewer headaches. So let this be a little jump start to maybe your gratitude journal. And even if you don't do it at the end of every day, even if it's not something you write down, just at the end of each day, think about something that you're grateful for at that day. And I know my husband and I used to do that a lot when we were feeling really disconnected from each other. So at the end of the night, I would say 3 things that I was grateful for, and he would do the same thing. And it was just kind of like a nice thing to do, to remind ourselves like how much we do for each other in just the short period of 24 hours that often we don't say. Like, I really appreciated it when you unstacked the dishwasher before I got home from work and I didn't have to stress about it. Like, even if it's little things, it doesn't have to be a big deal, but just expressing that verbally can really help impact our level of happiness. So, something to think about. Now we're going to switch gears and we're going to talk about how happiness is created, especially when it comes to our work life or activities that we like to engage in. Probably for some of you guys, your play activities that you've been engaging in for the weekly plan. So I want everyone to think about a time that you felt in the zone. You were immersed in an activity and you got lost in it. What activity was that? So go ahead and type in the chat box. Sleeping! Gaming, songwriting. I'm just reading what you guys are writing in the chat box. Video games, reading, redoing furniture, drawing, gaming. Video games, reading, making music, baking, programming, football, editing YouTube channel, playing music, watching movies, writing, making music, meditating, singing, graffiti, music, holding my wife. Aww. All right. So it sounds like a lot of you could think of something, an activity where you just kind of lost yourself. Well, there's actually a term for what this experience is that Dr. C, I'm not going to try to pronounce his name again, positive psychologist, came up with, which is called flow. So when you're in the zone, it's the state, this is the definition he gives it, a state in which people are so involved in an activity that nothing else seems to matter. The experience is so enjoyable that people will continue to do it even at great cost for the sheer sake of doing it. So obviously it's something that you enjoy doing. And you're completely engaged in this, and the outside world tends to like kind of fade away in that moment, living in that moment. And according to Dr. C, our nervous system can actually only process a certain amount of information at a time. And when you're engaged in this state of flow, you're so engaged that the brain doesn't have enough attention left to even monitor your hunger, outside problems, tiredness. So I know some of you gamers have probably been in that state where you're playing a game and you're so focused on what you're doing that you don't realize like you haven't eaten for a few hours or you haven't even gotten up to take a break, right? So that's definitely when you're in that flow state. Your mind is just boom in that zone. And this is actually when creativity can come out during flow, and it can almost feel automatic or effortless. Writers, artists, producers, when you get into the state and the creativity just starts going, or if you're playing a musical instrument, yoga, sports, I mean, all the different things that you guys mentioned can maybe get you into a state of flow. But obviously those things are going to be unique to the individual, right? So here's a example of getting into a flow state from a movie called The Legend of Bagger Vance. Awesome movie if you haven't watched it, from a little bit before, well, my time, I guess. So if you go to the material section and click on session 2 flow, it's the third from the bottom. in the material section with Will Smith, yes, and Matt Damon. Who couldn't like that duo? All right, so type done in the chat box when you guys are finished watching, please. All right, looks like most of you guys are finishing up. I really like that example of flow. And yes, if you haven't seen the movie, it's pretty cool. But the psychology of golf is actually a real thing, by the way. But it's a good example of flow for a lot of reasons. I like that it addresses practice, focus, and even that sense of timelessness. I mean, obviously, you can't get into a flow state playing golf if you've never played golf before, right? It has to be something that is challenging, not too easy, but it also has to be something that that doesn't cause you too much stress. It's too challenging, you know? So I like this. Hold on, where's my chart? Okay, here, I like this chart. It kind of explains. So you obviously have to have the ability. This has to be something that you're, good at, right? But it also has to be um, something that's not too easy, gives you some sense of challenge, and doesn't cause too much anxiety. So that's this flow state right there in the middle. That's kind of like that sweet spot. So let's go back and look at some of the characteristics of flow. So being completely involved in what you're doing, you're focused, you're concentrated, you're just really immersed in that activity, whatever it is. You give all your attention to that, right? And that's not always easy to do. A lot of times we get distracted. We always have our phones within reach. We're tempted to just pick them up and start looking at something, even when we're doing something else, right? So that sometimes in itself can take practice. Sometimes you can feel a sense of ecstasy in this moment because you're kind of outside reality. You're so focused on what's happening. You could also feel great inner clarity, knowing what needs to be done, knowing that you're doing well and you're in that zone can put you in kind of that really clear headspace. Also, you know that the activity is doable. So flow has to be something that your skills are adequate to the task, but it's still challenging enough so that you're not bored. And feeling a sense of serenity. So you're not worried about yourself. You have a feeling of going beyond your ego, and you're not really worried about how you look to others. And then you feel a sense of timelessness, thoroughly focused on the present. Hours seem to pass by in minutes, and you have intrinsic motivation. So the activity itself is the reward. You're not doing it for some external or extrinsic motivation. David said, sadly, if you have a God complex, it feeds it hardcore, LOL. Yeah, I could see that happening. Or some people might feel this doing an activity that's not necessarily good for them. But that's not what Dr. C is talking about here. So lots of the things that you mentioned are probably things that you've experienced flow state with. So here's a quote from Dr. C I really like. He says, "The best moments in our lives are not passive, receptive, relaxing times. The best moments usually occur if a person's body or mind is stretched to its limits in a voluntary effort to accomplish something difficult and worthwhile." So when you think back to pivotal moments in your life, other than the typical milestones, right? There are probably moments that you think, wow, like I can't believe I did that I accomplished that. Wow, I really pushed myself and look what I did. Like those are the moments that you're going to remember in life. And that's why we have a push category on your plans that you do each week, because pushing yourself out of that comfort zone is really going to help you learn and grow. And, I really like that he says that it's not about doing something relaxed. You really have to be actively engaged in something, for sure. And he also says he believes that happiness is not a fixed state, but can be developed as we learn to achieve flow in our lives. So it's really important to reframe how we view ourselves or our life circumstances, because if you walk around with negative perspective and negative energy, it's really going to inhibit your ability to flow or experience the state, and it's ultimately going to inhibit your creativity. So these two things are connected, flow and happiness, and they definitely play on each other. So let's talk about the PERMA model, because the PERMA model is something that Martin Seligman developed. He in his book Flourish, and he developed this model because he believes these 5 essential elements should be in place for us to experience lasting well-being. Because there's things in our life that are going to give us that temporary jolt of happiness, like when we do something like this gratitude exercise, we're going to feel happiness. But what really do we need to do in everyday lives that's going to help us be happy in the long term? So he says we need these 5 elements. First one is positive emotion. Oops, okay. So positive emotion is anything like peace, gratitude, joy, pleasure, inspiration, hope, curiosity, humor, love. These are all positive emotions. So, yes, we cannot be happy all the time, but we need to make sure that we are often experiencing these positive emotions. So, if you feel like you're not experiencing a lot of positive emotions in your life, you need to stop and think about, why is that? And what brings you positive feelings? What makes you feel joy? What makes you feel satisfaction, peace, gratitude? And how can you bring more enjoyment into your daily routine? Okay. So how do you increase those positive emotions in your life? The second element is engagement. Engagement is very, very similar to flow. So it's when you can create something, but you can also experience a deep engagement in an activity. So it could be playing a sport, spending time with friends, working on projects that you're interested in. And basically, when you're doing something that you enjoy, you don't have a lot of distractions, you're improving your concentration, you're doing something that makes you feel happy and connected, that's going to help you also get into a state of flow. Now, every time that you're engaged in activity, are you going to get into a state of flow? No, and not with everything, but you want to feel you can connect with something, right? Or create something or become immersed in an activity. That's going to be good for you. Brentley says, hold on. That's great, you guys. To me, I feel it's just being with family or with my own thoughts without a lot of stress is good for me. Yeah, sometimes can be just engaging with people that that you enjoy being around, and when you're hanging out, time flies because you're just enjoying yourself. David says, what if your positive emotion is the very thing that most people voted no for? So what if your positive emotion is attached to success? Is that what you're asking? Because we're going to get to that in a second. Okay. Wait for the A. All right. So relationships. So as humans, we are social beings, right? Good relationships are core for us. Time and time again, we see that people that have meaningful, positive relationships are happier than those who don't. And relationships, they take effort. They take engagement. They're often, something we have to make a conscious effort to work on, to build relationships, to help them keep growing, to maintain them, to keep that connection. On the same hand, you can't change other people. You can't really do much to change people. So if your relationships aren't positive, how far should you seek to preserve them, right? So relationships is about, I like to, if you feel like you have toxic people in your life, those relationships are not going to obviously contribute to your lifelong well-being, right? Dominique says, I'm a massive introvert, so even speaking with my friends can be hard. Yeah, and relationships aren't necessarily all just sitting down and talking. Relationships could be emailing if you like to write, or it could be connecting with people on the online forum. A lot of people are in different like support groups or things like that online where you can chat with people in that way. Or just sitting with someone. If you're not like a super talkative person, sometimes just sitting with a loved one is maintaining and nurturing that relationship, doing something together. That counts too. It doesn't mean you necessarily have to like have these really deep conversations all the time. It just means what can you do to feel connected to other people? Okay, so let's go on to meaning. Meaning comes from doing something or serving a cause bigger than ourselves. So it could be, this is a lot of people fit religion into here, or something that gives you meaning in terms of spirituality, or that from you meaning might be helping other people in some way. It also could be you find meaning in your career, you're doing something to help other people, or it could be finding meaning in your personal life, like spending time with your family, doing acts of kindness. That can all bring meaning, different things. So it doesn't, it's not about, oh, well, I have to volunteer or I have to go to church to find meaning in my life. No, you can find meaning in lots of different things. It really is something that's personal to you. So what is it that gives you that sense of meaning? Accomplishment, achievement, I think one that David was interested in. So obviously we all strive to better ourselves in some way, whether we're seeking to learn a new skill and master it. We've all, we're goal driven. Human beings are. We are, a lot of us, very competitive. We want to win. We want to achieve things, and that's a good thing. This is going to contribute to your lifelong happiness, David. So you can already check that off if this is something that makes you happy. But what he's saying is it's not just this. So you need to also take a look at the other elements, positive emotion, engagement, relationships, meaning, and make sure that you have all of these areas, because, it's all about balance in the end of the day. You don't want to be too focused on success and not focused enough on your relationships, or you don't want to be too focused on your relationships and not focused enough on, positive emotion, right? So it is about balance and kind of doing all of these things in combination. And a lot of times they're all related to each other. Okay. So what is a takeaway from today? Hopefully you have learned that positive psychology is all about focusing on the positive, what's working in our lives. It's all about engaging in activities that bring us flow, doing acts of gratitude or kindness that give us a sense of happiness. So hopefully you have some ideas today of how you can engage in different things to increase your happiness and well-being. Do we have any questions? Any questions? And like I said, if any of this interests you, if you look up Martin Seligman, his book Flourish, you could read more about PERMA. It definitely goes into a whole lot more detail. Gary says, how do we help others be happy? Well, the one true thing is that we can do things to support other people, but everyone is in control of their own emotions. So we can, be a pleasant person to be around and be supportive to that person, but it's really up to that person to find their own happiness. So I would encourage you to help others by teaching them about some of these things, right? About PERMA. And David says, can't make anyone do or be something they don't want to do. Yeah. And this obviously doesn't take into account if people are suffering from depression or things that there's sometimes not a lot of control over. But one of the main effective tools to treat depression is usually a combination of medication and cognitive behavioral therapy. And guess what? Cognitive behavioral therapy is all about changing your thoughts to more positive thoughts, which helps in turn create more positive emotions and behaviors in your life. So a lot of therapy is founded on positive psychology concepts. Derica says, that's where all begins, in the mind. Yep. Apparently it says my YouTube channel has helped people. I've gotten comments that I help people move through depression and avoid suicide. Yeah, so that is probably your YouTube channel for you, is definitely something that gives you meaning through helping other people. All right. Okay, guys. Well, thank you for the wonderful chats in the chat box and for participating. It is 3:01, so I'm going to go ahead and keep moving on to our next topic. So hold on one second. I'm going to get my slides ready. All right, can everyone see my screen? Brain development. Okay, so we're switching gears. We're talking more about emotional intelligence and positive psychology in our last lecture. Now we're going to be talking about what's happening in the brain. So all of you science people are going to feel probably a little bit more able to connect to this material. However, I'm just going to say right now, I am not an expert in brain development. This is not my specialty. So this is just the surface. I'm just giving you the main points and how the play can affect our brain chemistry. But I'm just going to put that out there. So we're not going to go too crazy in depth in this because I'm definitely not a neuropsychologist. However, I can tell you what they have learned. So let's go ahead and jump in and talk about this. But before we do that, why is it important? Why is this important to understand how the brain works? Why do we even bother putting this in our class? Do. Richard says, understand how we think and act. Jason says, it's kind of an important part of who we are. Brantley says, because the brain is complicated multi-tool that controls and helps construct the body and human psyche to overcome obstacles. The word psychology might have something to do with it. Yeah, it was kind of like one of those questions that seems obvious, right? Of course, the brain's important. It's part of us. Yes, but I like this quote from Dan Pink, who wrote the book A Whole New Mind, Why Right-Brainers Will Rule the Future. He says, we need to learn how it works before we learn how to work it. So obviously, if we have a better understanding of how the brain works, then we can come up with some tools to actually use this to our benefit. So if you haven't noticed, throughout the readings for each week, there are brain rules kind of scattered throughout. So in week 1, we talk about vision and wiring, and this week we talk about the brain's relation to music and memory. And then in week 3, we talk about gender, you'll see, and then week 4, sleep and attention and exercise. So these are things that we're gonna, you're gonna learn a little bit here and there throughout the class. But I don't want you to think this is going to be some boring biology lesson, although, yes, the brain is very fascinating. But we're really just going to not get too complex because obviously the brain is something that's very complex. So brain basics. Blah, blah, blah. We're going to talk a little bit about the triune brain theory, which breaks down the evolutionary aspects of the brain biology. Not too much detail, just some basic stuff. And we're going to explore a little bit how play interacts with the brain and changes it over time, in which we call neuroplasticity. Also, throughout the session, I'm going to give you some practical brain rules that can help you with your own experience as we go through the material throughout the way. So let's go ahead and talk about neuroplasticity. We already talked about that. Sorry. Brain power. Exercise boosts brain power. Whatever form we can find it. This is scientifically true. Exercise has tons of benefits. I don't think this is new to anybody. Obviously, you have seen we have a fit category in your plan each week. Well, science shows that if you get up and moving and give your body some oxygen to that brain, you are going to boost your brain power. So let's do a quick little exercise together. I found something that we can all do while sitting right where you are at your desk or on the couch or wherever you might be, and you don't need a lot of room to do it. So go ahead and click on in your materials section. Where is it? Boost your brain. And type done in the chat box when you finish. All right, just a quick minute to do it. Who honestly really did it? Raise your hand. I'm curious. You think 50%? Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, looks like almost half of the class did. All right. Thank you for humoring me. It's actually funny because, well, it's a good thing I didn't, there's a function here where you can put people's video cameras on. So luckily I didn't do that. But Jack LaLanne, he is actually in this video. He is he was a motivational speaker and nutrition expert, and he's called the Godfather of Fitness. He actually died at the age of 96 in 2011. But not only was he physically in shape until the day before, he died, he was also mentally sharp. And, you could just see, like, in interviews with him, even when he's in his late 90s, how, like, mentally fit he was, I guess I should say. Fun fact, the jumping jack was named after him. So, point being, exercise boosts your brain power. If you ever feel like you are stuck and you need a break, you're having a creative block, get up, exercise, and that's going to help you. I know we're working in a building right now that we sit in cubicles, and I try to every hour get up and take 120 steps. And it definitely does help me come back to my desk and feel a little bit refreshed. So that's kind of my goal that I've incorporated into my daily routine when I'm at work, just to kind of keep me going, keep me awake. All right, brain rule. Our brains have changed over time. So we're going to be talking about the triune brain theory. And this theory is based on the premise that over time, our brain has evolved into 3 different brains. And this evolutionary development of the brain shows that it was built or developed from the bottom up. So basically, the 3 parts of the brain are the reptilian brain, the limbic system, and the neocortex. So I'm going to explain a little bit about each one of these and talk about how they've developed through time. So the reptilian brain. So this is responsible for all of our involuntary things, such as breathing, our heart rate, balance, digestion. It's the most primitive, and it controls functions that we need for our survival, right? So this is the cerebellum and the brainstem, if we go back and look. Here. I don't know if you guys can see my mouse. Then we have the next brain level. I don't know why I said level. The next to evolve was the limbic system, also known as the feeling brain. So it's responsible for generating our emotions, especially fear and aggression. It's where we experience pleasure and pain. It's also responsible for memory storage and recall. So, like when you attach a memory with an emotion, you increase the likelihood of future recall. So, like, for example, sometimes we can have triggers, right, that are related to our senses. So maybe you have an old box of photos, and when you look at them, you feel a rush of emotions that takes you back to a time, or a perfume or a cologne that reminds you of a former partner, or a song that kind of brings you back to a certain period in your life. So our emotions or memories can be related to our senses as well. And this is what the limbic system is all about. It contains our emotions and our memories. So we obviously are going to do things that are going to help us seek pleasure and avoid things that could potentially cause pain. Now, let's take it a step further. The neocortex. This is the last part in our development as human beings. This is the highest level. We obviously started out with the reptilian brain and that lower level functioning. Then we developed that limbic system, housed our emotions. And then finally, the neocortex is the most advanced part that really makes us human. So this is where our higher level functioning takes place. Consciousness, judgment, abstract thought, decision making, problem solving, all that fun stuff. So if you were to look at a picture of a brain, you would traditionally see the two hemispheres, right? And the four lobes of the brain. Let me see. Go back to my picture. Yes. So here's the reptilian brain, and then here's the limbic system, and then we have our neocortex, which is this prefrontal cortex part of the brain as well. So let's do a review of our biology lesson that we just had very simply. Go to your material section again and click on brainstem, brainstem. All right, so everyone's like, I missed that show. Well, some of you remember the show. Classic. Yes, it was actually, I just Googled it because I was curious when it was on. It says 1995 to 1998. But anyway, they're mice, and they devise a plan to take over the world in each episode. But basically, who doesn't love Pinky and the Brain, as someone just said, Ryan? Yes. Casey says, wow, made it make me feel old. Sorry! We're going to go back in time even before that. So we'll really age ourselves in a minute. Glad you guys enjoyed that flashback. Now you're going to have that brain stuck in your head all day. So let's talk about why do we still play? So if our brains have evolved over time, then why do we play? Because we think that maybe that's something that should have been weeded out, right? It's kind of useless, doesn't really have a purpose. Yes, we experience pleasure, but not necessarily using that higher level thinking all the time when we're playing. So when it comes to the biological aspects, obviously there's many benefits to us still playing if you haven't done the reading yet. This is actually some pictures from campus. We like to do a lot of hands-on activities for sure, in case you're wondering what the heck these pictures are for. So let's have another brain rule. Brain rule. What you do and learn in life can actually physically change your brain. So who knows what this is called? I mentioned it before. It's one of your concepts for this week. Okay, you guys are still back in the 90s over there. Philip says brain plasticity. Plasticity. Close. Close, close. Neuroplasticity. So we used to think that our brains were hardwired after a certain age. You know the phrase, oh, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. But we're finding more and more that the brain is actually a little bit more plastic than we think. It can be molded, so to speak. We have this idea at a certain point, we are who we are, we're not going to change. Well, that's not necessarily true. Your brain has the ability to reorganizing itself when it forms new neural pathways as it adapts to different environments. So every time you learn a new task, your brain actually changes in its neural circuitry based on that new knowledge. So whenever you repeat that task, your brain can become more efficient and better performing. So it really builds up those neural pathways that each time that you practice until eventually it becomes a part of your brain. So what comes to mind when I say this? Like, what is something you've become more efficient or better at that you've practiced? Jason says, gives me hope for change for myself. Good. Philip says, drawing, football, playing sports, basketball, drawing, presentations, vocals, art, piano, right, talking to people. Yeah, so these are all things that you can say, hey, every time I've engaged in this, you've improved a little bit each time. You're literally reshaping your brain. So if you haven't watched the neuroplasticity video in your reading, I want you to watch it. It's a fantastic video, and it really just explains neuroplasticity in a very simple way because it can get a little bit complicated. So we're actually not going to watch that now because I don't want to watch something you guys are already going to watch. So basically, neuroplasticity is a very interesting field. They're still doing a lot of research on it, but the truth is that we can train our brain, and that's what it boils down to. So I'm going to talk about an example. So there's a study conducted in 2007. So I know that was a while ago, but it was done at the Harvard Medical School, and subjects were instructed to play the piano, just a simple 5-finger exercise every day for 2 hours. So if you've ever learned to play piano, it's not very exciting when you first start, right? You're just doing scales over and over and over again. It's repetition. Your fingers are just getting used to it, getting used to the movements. So they had to do this every day for 2 hours. Then after each practice session, they're hooked up to this machine, and it would measure their brain function and different parts of their brain. And so they found that after just a week of practice, the area of the brain that's devoted to finger movements grew and took over a larger part of the brain. So they said it was like dandelions on a suburban lawn, right? They just popped up out of nowhere. Here they are. Pretty amazing, right? But it was no surprise to them at the time because there's a lot of research out there showing that if you use certain muscles, it causes the area of the brain responsible for its movement to grow. So like, not necessarily a big deal. And conceptually it makes sense. The more you use a muscle, the more it grows. So we would think of, okay, well, your brain is physically going to grow too, right? Like muscle memory, Sandy says exactly. Well, these researchers took it a step further. So they took a second group of subjects, and instead of instructing them to physically practice the piano, they only had them think about practicing it. So they played the piano in their head, holding their hands still, and just imagined how they would move their fingers every day for 2 hours. I don't know how the heck people did that, but that's another story. So they had their brain function measured, and what's amazing is they found the same amount of growth. So the ability of simply thinking about something can change the physical structure and function of your brain. So we were just talking in our last first hour about positivity, right? So thinking about positive thoughts or doing acts of kindness or even being grateful can actually change our brain as well in a positive way. So the myth is, the myth is obviously that we can't change, right? That we are who we are. You can't teach an old frog new tricks, but I'm sure you've heard that before. But I'm going to show you another example. I'm going to talk about another study that kind of has the same idea. So this is more recent, in 2014. So it was a trial funded by the National Institutes of Health. And they found that cognitive training for older adults could last as long as 10 years. So older adults, we know their memory can decline, their reasoning and speed of processes slowers, So they basically got 2,800 participants from ages 65 to 94 from all different backgrounds, races, and ethnic groups. They had 10 one-hour sessions of brain training, like memory, reasoning, or processing skills for 5 to 6 weeks. They followed these people for 10 years, and they found at the 10-year follow-up significantly less difficulty performing daily living skills than untrained participant. For just 10 one-hour sessions of brain training, lasted for 10 years. I mean, how cool is that? So the truth is that we can teach an old dog new tricks. We can have real lasting physiological change down to the biology of our brain. But, it is something that takes practice. So think about, have you ever broken a bad habit? Like some people quit smoking, biting your nails, late night snacking. Right. So we can do these things. It definitely takes time and practice, but we can get rid of bad habits and we can also start new positive habits. Brantley said, the power of the mind. Exactly. So I like this quote from Henry David Thoreau, and it says, "A single footstep will not make a path on the earth, so a single thought will not make a pathway in the mind. To make a deep physical path, we walk again and again. To make a deep mental path, we must think over and over the kind of thoughts we wish to dominate our lives." And this again ties into the positive psychology topic that we are talking about earlier. The more and more positive thoughts that we have, the more we're going to be a positive person. And that's just going to become a part of us and who we are. So let's go on to another brain roll. We don't pay attention to boring things. It's as simple as that. Hopefully you guys are not bored. Don't admit that. So let's watch a video and take a brain break. What's a conjunction? Let's find out together. Go to your materials section and click on conjunction junction and type done in the chat box when you're finished. All right, you guys finished? I saw you talking in the chat box, so I thought you might be done. Sam, oh my God, I love that one. I'm just a bill. Yes. I still remember that to this day when I hear I'm just a bill, you think of that song, right? Or when I just said watch Conjunction Junction, someone said in the chat box, what's your function? So these things we still remember how many years later. Okay, so I looked it up while we were watching and I saw the original series was on from 1973 to 1985. And then it was later revived between 1993 and 1999. Okay, so I watched it when it was that second airing, so I did not age myself too much. And this was actually shown on Saturday mornings in between cartoons. So they would have these short little snippets that were educational. Because we know that we don't pay attention to boring things, especially when it comes to kids, right? We want to learn something that's fun. So they tricked you into learning, these Schoolhouse Rock people. And, we still remember them all these years later. I mean, there's some of these songs I could probably sing to you. So what does this have to do with the brain? What does this have to do with memory and learning? Well, they actually had a team, Schoolhouse Rock, of educational psychologists working for them. And a lot of PBS shows, I know I have toddlers now, so I'm always like, PBS is my jam. But Sesame Street, a lot of these educational shows, they always have educational psychologists working on this stuff because they are really invested in, okay, how are we going to get kids to learn in a fun way, because we don't pay attention to boring things, right? And a lot of it is about repetition and music. It's shown that when there is a tune or a jingle to something, kids are more likely to remember it. All that good stuff. So when we talk about play, one of the things is it's fun, right? And we're truly learning something at the same time. That should be fun too. And we're using different parts of the brain. So another brain rule here. Sensory integration. So the more senses we can integrate into our learning, the better chance we have of holding on to that information. So in the Schoolhouse Rock clip we just watched, it has fun visuals with the conductor. It has a song to it. It has a rhythm. It's got a melody in there and the information. So the actual learning is just kind of stuck in there. So this is a great example when we think about how to truly internalize and hold on to information, right? That's the way to do it. Or Pinky in the Brain, right? That was educational too. Dominic says, Crashbox on HBO taught me a lot. Exactly like the jingles. I'm just reading the chat box. Power Rangers. Was that educational? I don't remember. Okay. So, brain break. Let's play a game. Is everybody ready? Okay. On the next screen, I'm going to show you a number and I want you to look at it and don't write it down. Here we go. Okay, now write it down. No, not in the chat box. Oh my God, I should have said that. Don't tell us. No, don't tell us the answer. Okay, write it down on a piece of paper. Too late, I guess. All right. It looks like a lot of you got it. Okay, so most of you guys did pretty good. Yep, I see that you got it. You got it right. Fantastic. I wish I could say, oh my God, you guys are geniuses. But we touch on something called cognitive load theory. So it's not important that you remember, but the message is important. We can only hold 7 pieces of information in our short-term memory. So to most of us, what does this look like? I know we don't memorize phone numbers anymore because that was more back in the day too. But yeah. So most of us, this looks like a phone number, right? You might repeat it over and over, just like that when I showed it on the screen, 591-7413, 591-7413, until it was removed. And then if you keep saying it, you remember it, right? Easy peasy. But let's try something a little bit more challenging. So I'm going to have you look at the next number and see if you can remember it. I'm going to give you 20 seconds. Here we go. Okay, time's up. Go ahead and write it down. You might as well do it in the chat box at this point. Let's see who gets it. Casey says, I was dumb when I saw it. Derica says, all I remember is 591. You guys gave up. You're like, you know what? I'm done. Okay. What I'm noticing is a lot of you remembered the first three numbers. Right? A lot of you remembered the first three numbers. Now, if you got that whole thing right, that's pretty awesome. But did you guys feel the difference from looking at the first number to looking at this number? Did you feel like a little bit stressed and anxiety? Like, whoa! Well, that's what's happening. That's called a cognitive load. You have this trigger reaction that's going to be impossible for you to memorize this number. So what do? How do you remember it? Any ideas? What's a way to get apart this overload? Casey says, break it apart. Isaiah, break it down. Exactly. So a number that looks like this can look overwhelming. However, if we break it apart into different pieces or segments, 3 numbers at a time or 4 numbers at a time, like our credit card. Does anyone have their credit card memorized number? I do, because you can tell how bad I am at online shopping, because that's all I do now. So yes, I have my credit card number memorized. 4 at a time, right? This is called chunking. So by doing this to 3 or 4 numbers at a time or chunking it, you're kind of cheating that cognitive load and treating each chunk as one piece of information. Or if you sang a song or made a rhythm out of it or put a beat to it when you're saying the numbers, those are also some great techniques that can help as well. So I want to share a technique with you that you can hopefully carry with you moving forward. So you're all creative. So let's see another one. This one's called story time. So let's take a look at another number. Oh no, there's no way to remember this number, right? So let's create a story to help us. Let's look at the number, and the story starts with, once upon a time, there was 7 18-year-olds. These 7 18-year-olds were out for the day heading to the court to play basketball. When they got there, there was a group of 35-year-olds taking up the court. Those old 35-year-olds. So the 7 18-year-olds said to the 35-year-olds, let's be fair. We're going to play you guys for the court. The winner takes it. So the 7 18-year-olds play the 35-year-olds. It was an amazing game of basketball. Final score was 28-20. 28-20. Guess who won the game? Who won the game? The 35-year-olds won the game. All right. Now see if you can write down that number. And feel free to write it in the chat box. All right, we got a few guesses. Looks like some people are pretty close. Okay. Or at least you remember 7 18-year-olds, right? I know at least everybody got the first 3 numbers. And then 35-year-olds. Right? Okay, so let's see. So this isn't, it looks like you guys did pretty good. You missed the one. Yeah, so, but you're more likely to remember it than just reading off these numbers. So now for some of you, the chunking may have worked better. You're like, this is too hard. I can't remember that whole story. But other people, depending on your learning style. And if you're a more visual person, the chunking might work better for you. If you're an auditory learner, the story might work better for you. So it really sometimes depends on that. But you got to find a technique that works for you. So this isn't just about me telling you, oh, this is the way that you need to learn and memorize things. But we just want to understand the different techniques so we can just say, hey, it's all about reaching that long-term memory. How are you going to remember everything that you learned from this class, 10 years from now? I mean, if you have a test and you do a cram session, where you just get some Red Bull and you sit there and you start highlighting everything and memorizing everything right before. Don't make me sing, Brantley. He says, sing us the lesson. You wish. You definitely don't want to hear me sing. But that's probably something that would be quite memorable. Good point. So if you have a cram session, sometimes it works. You do okay, right? But you come home, you get some sleep. What happens the next day? Boom, information is gone. You forgot it all by the time that final exam comes up. So even though we expect our learning to be fun and interactive, we're just kind of looking at words. We're not making it fun, right? So sometimes, as you go through your programs here, you're going to have to memorize things. You're going to have to, I don't like the word regurgitate information, but you want it to stay in that long-term memory because these are things that are going to be helpful for you in your career. So don't cheat yourself out on the experience. It's not about the grades, right? It's what skills you can produce. The skills are what's important, not being able to get a grade. You don't get graded when you're going to be out there in the industry. So when you're on a set or working in a studio, there's no time for what's the multiple choice. You need to know how it works. So that's why it's important to have things and information internalize and enter that long-term memory, so that way you have that true understanding. So some of the brain rules that we went over is the ones that are highlighted here. So if you are interested in learning more about the brain rules, the book Brain Rules is great. It's by John Medina. He actually has, if you search Brain Rules John Medina, he has videos for each one of these brain rules. I show those in the campus class. They're just too long to show in this format, but they're really kind of cheesy but fun ways to kind of learn information. So the ones highlighted are the ones that we talked about today. The other ones we kind of scattered throughout your reading. Any questions about what we talked about today? Just kind of touching the surface on this brain stuff. But like I said, you're going to want to go back into the material section and watch, I'm sorry, not the material section, the platform, and watch the neuroplasticity video as well as look at all the other information that's in there. And I want to end a little bit early because I know I didn't give you a break in between. I just kind of wanted to power through. So I also selfishly, in 4 minutes, there's going to be a launch coming from the coast, and I kind of want to see it. See if I can see it in the sky. A rocket. Brantley says, did you know this was the year they're going to attempt the first full body transfer surgery? That sounds interesting. Man, science is so amazing. Hopefully you guys don't have, I totally just forgot what I was going to say. Okay, I'm trying to read Casey's comment. Okay, something I find helps me remember is to question something about the information. Hold on. That sounds like it relates to the class. So was the father of psychology. Well then, why is it that he of all people, ? Okay. So asking yourself questions about the material. That's a way to retain the information. Awesome. Brantley says they're going to take a guy who's paralyzed and transfer his full head to a new body of a donor. Oh my God. That is amazing. Yeah. The science stuff is freaky, but awesome. Okay. Well, thank you all for participating. I really enjoyed our time together. And if you have any questions, you can always reach out to your instructor. And if you guys need help with anything else, please feel free to use the community board Sometimes it's more helpful when your classmates help you than sometimes your instructor. Okay, I'm going to enjoy the launch. All right, I'm going to get out of here. I got 2 minutes to go walk outside. I'll see you guys. Have a good rest of your day.